This episode is sponsored by Hired.com. Are you searching for a new job? That can be stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through the interview process just to find out at the very end that the salary, offer, or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Hired is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities in engineering, development, design, product management, data science, sales, and marketing. We make your job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of when and how you connect with compelling new opportunities. After completing one simple application, top employers apply to hire you, and on Hired you receive personal interview requests and upfront salary information so you can make informed decisions about what opportunities to pursue over a condensed timeline. Hired offers access to more than 4,000 innovative employers, including big brand names like Facebook and smaller emerging startups. The size and type of company you want to connect with is totally up to you. And we help you find new opportunities in 17 major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Open to relocation? Let them know. Your privacy and autonomy in your job search is of utmost importance. And if you sign up today using the show's link, that's hired.com/rubyrogues, you can get double the normal hiring bonus. That's $600 instead of $300. So go check them out at hired.com/rubyrogues.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel we have Dave Kimura.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we're going to be talking about finding a developer job. This is something I suggested because I've been working for a while on a course for this, and I kind of want to talk through a few things, and Dave also mentioned a few things that he's seen that I think we should dig into. I think the first thing that we should talk about, though, is just, Dave, you mentioned that people have this internal clock as far as jobs go. Do you want to kind of explain what you've seen there, and then we can kind of jump in and talk about why we think that is and how people should approach that?
Yeah, sure. So, just given my experience and some background about me is that I've been at my current employer for about 8 years. And most of that time I've been doing development. In my previous employer, I was a systems administrator for a small engineering company, and I was there for 6 years. So that's been pretty much my entire working career. A few little odd jobs here and there before I landed the sysadmin job. But one thing I've noticed in the developer community is that, people have like this 1 to 2 year internal clock that as soon as it goes off, it's like, oh, time to find another job. And it's one thing that's kind of always confused me because, sure, there's going to be situations that you run into where the company has a direction or a employee has an issue that is kind of almost of a deal breaker to you. But, I usually have stuck around and stuck through those things, even when I was wrongfully judged on something. And it's all kind of worked out. So it's one of those things that's kind of always confused me, that why do people go from one job to another job in such a short amount of time, especially when you're looking at a development job where the onboarding time to actually get in there and start being useful could take a little bit of time, especially if you don't know the space that program is solving. Okay,
so let's compare notes. So I graduated with a computer engineering degree from BYU. That's Brigham Young University, for those that aren't familiar. It's here in Provo, Utah. And my first job, I was basically running the technical customer support for Mozy, which is a company here in Pleasant Grove. And I worked there. I did that for about a year, and then I moved over to QA for 6 months. And then I switched jobs. So I'd been there for a year and a half, and I went to another company. They were a consultancy, worked for them for a year. They laid me off. Went and worked for another company that did education lead generation, worked for them for about a year, and then switched jobs again. And worked for a company that did crime data and mapping. And I worked for them for about 6 months, and they laid me off. And then I went freelance, and I hopped clients whenever things changed. I think the longest I had a client was a year and a half. So this kind of internal clock that you're talking about, I either hit it by necessity because they laid me off, or because it was time to move. And so I think there are reasons for it. I think also that in a lot of cases the employers probably need to do a little bit more to keep people engaged and keep them around, because I definitely agree with you. It's a huge loss whenever you get somebody up to speed and then have them go. And so, anyway, the reasons that I typically would change jobs. So that first job when I was in QA, the reason I switched jobs was because the company had been acquired and the character of the company had just changed. The culture was changing. There were a lot of people that were trying to make career plays up into the larger company that had acquired us, which was EMC Corporation, which is now owned by Dell, incidentally. And the other thing was that one of my coworkers said, go out, get a competitive offer, bring it back, and they'll match it. So I went out and got a competitive offer, and the competitive offer was a $20,000 a year raise. And I was making $40,000 a year at the time. So it was essentially half my salary again. And they came back and they wouldn't match it. And so I left. And the money was just, it was one of the things that really, I just couldn't say no to it. I had stock options, but the stock options wouldn't have made up for it. So I cashed out the stock options I had and then left. And then the next company I worked at, I was pretty happy there, but they laid me off. So after a year, they ran out of Ruby on Rails work and they laid me off. So I went to another company. I actually wound up getting my next job the same day. I went home, told my wife I'd been laid off, posted my resume, got a call for a job interview, went into the job interview. They said, when can I start? When can you start? They called me on my way home. I said, tomorrow. And then I went home, took my wife out for our anniversary. It was our 3rd anniversary. I got laid off. And, went to work the next day. That company was a terrible place to work. Sometimes you just wind up with those. My boss was kind of a jerk. They weren't very well organized. And so I wound up looking for a job after about 6 months because I was just not happy there at all. And I joined one of the teams, and within a couple months I was leading the team. I was team lead. And my programming career was about a year and a half long at that point. So the next job that I got was crimereports.com, and they just had some financial issues and wound up laying me off. But yeah, so it was kind of a here and there. The way that Crime Reports was run, or the company name was Public Engines, and the team that I was on, I was pretty happy. I probably would have stayed there for years. But, it just didn't work out. And that's kind of the world you're in with startups, and that was, I think, part of the issue with me jumping around. But the jobs that I wound up leaving of my own accord, it was either because I could make substantially more somewhere else, or because the working conditions just weren't ideal and I wasn't happy at all there. If it was something that I thought I could work through, I encourage people to try and work through them, but sometimes you can't. And so I think that's part of it too. And I also know people that have hopped around jobs where they're in this career because it's a challenge and because they're learning new things and they really enjoy that aspect of programming. And what winds up happening is they'll be at a job for a year or two, and then it's not a challenge anymore. They're not learning, they're not growing, they're not leveling up the way that they want to, and they kind of lean on their job for some of that. And I think that's fair to a certain degree, but then the other thing is that their employer won't invest in them leveling up. So they won't pay for video learning services. They won't pay to send them to conferences. They won't pay for, in-house training or anything like that. And so they feel like they're stuck and that they're not going anywhere. And I actually interviewed a whole bunch of people for my course on how to find a job, and especially people who have been in their programming career for less than 2 years. When they're looking to make that first switch, that's typically how they're feeling, is they're saying, you know what, I've been here for a year or two. I feel like I'm just kind of, put here and told to code whatever I'm going to code, but I don't really have opportunities to grow and learn, and I feel like everything's kind of moving on without me. And so they move on and they find another company that's doing something that's different or interesting, or at least will invest in them in some way so that they feel like they can grow on their own outside of work.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that, I've been doing relatively the same thing for the past 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always learning. Every time I go to tackle something, I always try to approach it from a different perspective, or at least try to, to really see, okay, here is what I've done before. And was that really the right way to do it? Or is there a better way that I'm not seeing? And I'll take some time to do some R&D and some research to really find, what is going to be the best, the fastest way, the most maintainable way, the way that's going to minimize the technical debt. And really, every opportunity to write a line of code, I'm always trying to see how can I improve myself. Mm-hmm. So, I guess unless if you're doing something that's very mundane, like data entry, as a developer, where it's just, maybe not that repetitive, but something similar to that where there is no room for growth. Yeah, I could definitely see how that could be annoying, because my brain is definitely wired to always have to learn. If there's something I don't know, then it's something that I will look up and research, really invest the time into it. So
I have to ask then, is this something that you're encouraged to do or allowed to do at work? Where I've got to build this feature, I've got to write this this function or this method or this class to do this particular job. Are you encouraged to actually figure out how to do it better? Because I've been at some companies, and I know other people that I've talked to have been at some companies where that kind of stuff is discouraged. It's just turn the crank faster and get more stuff out. Well,
because I'm over the project, I take the time to do it, and I encourage the people who, are on that team to do it as well. Because if there is a better way to do something out there, and if it is something that everyone can personally and for the company benefit from, then it's not wasted time. Wasted time is having to go back to a old part of your application and completely refactor the entire thing. So
I totally agree. But some companies are just short-sighted enough to where, it's oh, well, you want to write tests? Well, that's time that you could be writing code.
Yeah. And those companies, I guess, if they're startups, I can definitely see their perspective that they want to hurry up and get something out the door. But you also have to figure if the application you're building is full of bugs because you didn't do your due diligence and write tests, or if there's a lot of security issues, if you haven't had a code audit, or even done something as simple as run a brakeman on your code to see any kind of OWASP top 10s or vulnerabilities, then you're going to pay for it in the long run. I mean, there's no way around it. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's a matter of when. And did you allow your developers to do their job and their due diligence to protecting the code and the company?
I totally agree. The other aspect of this that I see, though, is that, you mentioned startups, and sometimes you're trying to run fast enough to, to keep the water in the bucket, so to speak, right? So you've got the bucket tipped forward, and you're just running fast enough so it doesn't spill any on the ground. Because, at the end of the day, if you can cross the finish line first with the most water in your bucket, then you win. But when you're working under those circumstances, the teams that I've seen most successful, especially with the developers working in there, are developers where they feel like they're part of the team and that they're part of making a contribution to what the company is doing. And if they're just there to, like I said, turn the crank, and they're getting pressure about turning the crank faster without understanding sort of the objectives that the company is going to have longer term, then again, they just feel stuck. It's like, well, the pressure's way up, my stress level's through the roof, and at the end of the day, no matter what I do, I'm just going to get yelled at to crank more code.
Yeah, you
need them to believe in the mission, and you need them to be part of the team. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Okay, so let's forget about the mission and forget about the team. It's just you and your manager. If your manager is telling you to work 80 hours a week, something is wrong. I mean, something is very wrong. In fact, I usually, or not usually because I've gotten yelled at about it, but I do work 60 to 80 hours a week for my day job because I enjoy it. I truly enjoy what I do, and I just can't get away from it. I have a problem. Okay, I realize that, and my manager tells me like, stop, quit
Yep.
working so much. And I think that's healthy, to have a company that understands that you are a human. You do have limitations. And if you're unable to recognize those limitations that you should have around yourself, then you probably have some kind of addiction or problem. In my case, I wouldn't say that I'm a workaholic. I'm just someone who likes to work a lot.
Yeah.
If that's not oxymoron. But, I think that often managers forget that developers are humans. Ernie Miller had this movement, humane development, which I really liked. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. I know Ernie pretty well, but yeah, I haven't followed that one.
Yeah, so he's from Louisville, Kentucky, and that's where I had moved from a couple years ago. So I was attending his Ruby meetup and got to chat with him a bit. And the whole principle around the humane development is the developers are humans, and they should be treated as such. They're not machines. They're not something that you bark orders to. You treat them as people, and you expect out of them as people.
Yeah, well, and I mean, even if you want to think of them as assets or machines, if you think of your developers that way, I mean, there's a certain amount of maintenance that you have to put into something that gives you something back. And so if you're looking at that and you're recognizing, you know what, I'm going to run this person into the ground, or I'm going to ruin the capabilities of this person, at least short term, if I don't do some common maintenance. So I agree that we should treat people as humans, but you also have to recognize that, maybe they need some downtime. Maybe they need, some of that self-care or self-maintenance, because they're the ones that are going to have to take care of themselves. You ultimately can't do that as a company, at least not in the deep, meaningful ways that are going to get people along to where they need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little side story, completely unrelated, but I had this car back when I was a teenager and I was driving. It was a 1987 Toyota Camry. I think it was a piece of crap, but it ran like a champ. It ran so well that I forgot to change the oil for 30,000 miles. And
oh, wow.
Yes, that's right. 35,000 some odd miles. And the car blew up. Like, it literally sent a piston up through the hood of the car. So
oh, wow.
I think that goes to show, if you don't give it just some maintenance, then things are going to happen. It might not seem like it right now, or it might not even seem like it for several months, but the damage is being done. And if you don't take care of it, then something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, my sister did that to a car a couple weeks ago, and yeah, I was teasing her about letting the magic smoke that makes the car work out. But yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you don't take care of it, eventually it's going to have that damage done. And, as entrepreneur, I run into this as well. Sometimes I'm just like, I have all of these things that have to get done. And eventually I just get to the point where I'm trying to get stuff done and I'm really just staring at my screen wishing that I could work. And it's because, I don't do that maintenance for myself. So,
yeah. So my body has kind of been trained well enough to, or I've learned to listen to my body, because there was many times where I would just overexert myself to a point where I would physically get sick. I was always have been really prone to strep throat. So I would literally work myself into getting the flu or strep throat or something. So I've learned to listen to my body to say, hey, look, either to my manager saying, hey, I need some time off this sprint. I know we're really busy, but I need some rejuvenating time. Or even on my side projects, when it's 1 or 2 a.m., I know that I still have this thing that I want to build, this one last feature I want to complete tonight. But, of course, 1 and 2 a.m. is, kind of over exerting when I wake up at 6 a.m. every day. But it's something where you have to learn to listen to your body.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. So if somebody feels like they're overextended by their job and they can't get out of it, or they feel like they're stuck and they're not learning, what do you generally tell people to do as far as getting another job? I mean, do you tell them to stick it out or try and find a way around it? Or do you just say, you know what, go find another job?
Well, I would first say that you need to, look at the situation and really read the situation. Is the issue a self-induced issue, or is it something that the employer is pushing onto you? So for me, I'm fortunate enough to have a house where I can keep things segregated. So even though I have a laptop that my work has provided me that I do my work on, I make sure that I'm not sitting on my couch working or even just browsing the internet on that laptop. I keep a actual physical separation of when I'm working and when I'm not working, when I'm relaxing, even on my side projects. So, it's one of those things where if you find that you're always working because maybe you have your TV in your family room and then that's kind of where you have your computer and your laptop and you're just kind of sitting on the couch working at night, that's a big deal, to me at least, because you're not creating a physical separation of where you work and where you relax. And what you're going to find happen is you're either going to never work and always relax, or you're going to be always working and never relaxing. So having a physical separation of your relaxation area and your work area, to me, is really important. Even, if you don't have a large space, if you live in a single room dwelling like a studio, get a little separator wall and just isolate one small area for your work and use that area only for your work. Don't let other areas of your life, seep into there, and vice versa.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up boundaries, because when I was working for Mosey, I got pretty burned out, and I was actually running their, like I said, their technical customer support department. And so, the other folks would come in, they'd work their hourly rate or their hours, and then they would leave. And I was super burned out by the time I moved over to QA. And there were some other political reasons why I switched departments. But one thing that was interesting was that when I switched departments, I decided that I was just going to work 40 hours, and that was it. And if they wanted more time than that, then, they were going to have to justify it. And I'll tell you, man, things got so much better just by having those boundaries. And, I work from home too. And yeah, it makes a huge difference. When I'm in my office, I'm working. And, to kind of reverse what you're saying, my kids generally don't come in my office. Now, my 20-month-old does, because she doesn't think about it. She just, she'll come visit me. And my other kids will come bother me sometimes when my wife's not here, if I'm the parent that's home. But it's just really interesting, so that when I'm in here, I'm working. And then, when I go downstairs, sometimes I'll fool around with a game on my phone or something. But other than that, I'm cooking dinner or reading to my kids, or, just doing those other things that are involved in that. And having that separation, just setting those boundaries. This time is work time. This time is not work time. And setting aside the time for family and things like that is really important. And I think your point too, where you said, is it self-inflicted or is it work-inflicted? A lot of times we misunderstand what the expectations are at work, and we push it. And sometimes we just really like our job and we push it. And I've done both of those. And so just by having a little bit of communication with your boss and just saying, hey, you know what, I've been working these crazy hours and I just don't feel like I can do it anymore. A lot of times they'll look at you and go, we don't want you to work those crazy hours. We want you to have a healthy lifestyle so that, you can continue to contribute here, that you feel good about working for us, and so that you can enjoy your life. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that any employer would never say, I expect you to work 80, 90 hours a week. They would probably get sued or in trouble.
I have friends that work for companies that have told them, we're a shop that works 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And, you know what? The money is good, but yeah, I see some of them just, I mean, they just burn out hard. And then, other people take advantage of some of the perks to make it work out, so they have like a gym or something there. And, sometimes they can get some relief and, release, and what they're doing at work is something they really enjoy, and they don't have a family to go home to. And so they kind of make it work. But a lot of people, if they have more than just a couple of things to juggle, can't handle an 80-hour work week along with everything else.
Yeah. So if your employer is, especially if you're a small shop and if you have a couple of developers and a manager, I'm sure you guys are following some kind of agile or Scrum methodology, but one important thing to do is planning, to see what everyone's capacity is for a particular duration of time, and then see what you can actually fit into there. Because if you don't have anything like that scheduled and put on paper, then you're going to end up working too much. You're going to overpromise and and underdeliver sometimes. So I think, implementing some kind of agile or Scrum methodology where, you develop fast and you do a lot of iterations, but you also plan. You create a backlog of all the items that you want to do, and then you have a meeting to say, here within this sprint, we're going to be able to pull in this many defects and this many new features. And don't exceed that, because you're essentially saying, given our capacity, here's what we're able to do. Anything beyond that, we're not able to do. There just is not the time. And I think you'll see that you're either not working enough or you're working too much. One of those two things will come out of it. Or you're already doing a good job, in which case I'll just shut up.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. I think it's funny that we started basically with the premise of we're going to talk about finding a new job, and we've gone totally over into self-care. Well, it's self-care. It's how do you take care of yourself so that you can do the job, and how do you set boundaries and things like that. But it's so important, and I think people kind of write this off as soft skills, and I don't have to be good at that, or I'm not good at that. And I just think long term, in order to have the career and the outcomes that you want, I think you have to understand some of these things. Now, again, I mean, if if it fits into your lifestyle to work crazy hours and do a bunch of stuff like that, then, more power to you. But, for me, and it sounds like for Dave, that doesn't necessarily always work. And so, yeah, you've got to figure out what you can give, what you're willing to give, and what the trade-offs are. Because, I mean, I've had my wife come to me a few times and say, basically, we need you around, and okay, well, so I cut back on work or cut back on, some of the other extracurricular activities that I've done. In fact, I did that recently where I quit a couple of things that I had going on, and just, I just looked at people who were counting on me and basically said, look, I've got to give these up so that I can do the other stuff that's more important to me.
Yeah. And, I don't have a social life, so it makes it really easy to do a whole bunch of work or extracurricular side projects. But, it's one of those things where it's important to find a job, but it's also important to find a mentor, whether at the job or somewhere else, that, learning is your responsibility. It's going to benefit you. The company's benefit is going to be a side effect. So it's really important for you to find someone who is better than you, that doesn't ridicule you, but they really try to help you grow. For example, we have a developer at our company, and one of the things that he's really been wanting to learn that's not really work related, but it's something that he's been really struggling with, is the whole full aspect, the full stack of the development, being able to deploy your applications, being able to set up and maintain servers, and being able to, kind of network them all together. So I'm actually having him over my house tomorrow night, and we're just gonna, hack around at night. I have unfortunately, I have a bunch of computers I'm not using anymore, so I'm just going to install some hypervisors on them and show him like, hey, here's a dummy application that you've built. Here's how we would deploy it with, a load balancer, multiple web servers, with the database backend, with a caching environment, and all of that stuff. So it's something where I really like him, and I've taken him kind of like under my wing to mentor him on some things. And it's something where it's not directly work related. It's something that is going to benefit him, and it's going to change his way of thinking, approaching things, like not storing images on the actual computer, but use a external service to where multiple web servers can communicate to. It's going to change his way of thinking that the company in turn would benefit from, because it's going to make him more efficient in what he does, because he's starting to think about these kind of things as they come up. But it's something where he wants to learn. The company doesn't have the resources. I'm not saying that's about our company, but, let's say your company doesn't have the resources to really show you these kind of things. So having a mentor at your company or outside of your company, someone else, to really kind of help you through and work through some of these things with you can be very beneficial for your own personal benefit, but also your career.
Yeah, I'm just going to pile in on that. So, I mentioned Mosey and, moving on to my first development job at the consultancy that I worked for. When I got hired, there was another developer there named Nate. And Nate's somebody that I've been trying to get on this show for a while. Anyway, he was a huge help in that way. I got mentorship on the job. And all of the things that I didn't know about programming, things like design patterns and, testing techniques and things like that, were all things that he helped me figure out. And then as I moved on to other places and wasn't working with Nate as closely, I wound up meeting David Brady at the users group. And again, he walked me through a ton of stuff, off hours, because we didn't work together. And it's really critical that you have that. And it's one of the things that I tell people to consider when they're looking for that next or first programming job, is what kind of people do you want to work with? And are you looking for a mentor, and do you want them to be at the job you're working at? And those kinds of things are definitely worth considering when you're trying to figure out where you want to work, or, if you're going to stay where you are and you don't have that at work, where do you find it otherwise? And I found that in a lot of cases, talking to people on online forums, if you don't have a local users group, also works. So for me, the local users group definitely has paid off in that way. But there are other ways to find mentors if you want. And Brian Hogan, who's another host on this show, he actually has railsmentor.org, and you can go find mentors on there.
Do you ever have issues crop up in production that you don't see in development? Do you even know how your app is performing in production? Performance, errors, and analytics to figure out where your app is bogging down are important to keep an eye on. You could try one of those error tracking apps, but why not use a tool that does it all? Try Datadog. Datadog tracks performance, collects data on your errors, and provides you with the information you need to improve your user's experience and fix bugs without having to log into the production server and dig through the logs. What if my app spans across multiple servers and services, you ask? Datadog seamlessly collects metrics from every corner of your application, including services like Amazon AWS and systems like Redis. So whether you want a clear view into your application's performance, need to be notified of new errors, or to keep track of your application across various services you use Datadog. If you go to devchat.tv/Datadog and start a free trial, they'll send you a free Datadog t-shirt.
A Ruby mentor. I don't remember. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. So it's one thing that I've always kind of struggled with, because I preach this, but I myself don't have a mentor. Everything I do, I know what the issue is, like what task I'm trying to solve. So I will do a lot of research, look online, try to find gems, parse through a book, because I really don't read books too much. But I'll do all the research to figure out, is this the right way to do something? So, you can kind of, it's not as efficient, but you can kind of be your own mentor if you have that capability of self-teaching, and that's how I learned Ruby. It was, basically all self-taught. They didn't offer it in my college, and, I don't even think it was even a well-known language back then. But it's definitely more difficult.
Yeah, I agree. One other thing that I just point out is that, so currently I have a mentor for some of the stuff that I'm doing, but it's all on the podcasting and business end of things. And it's not uncommon for business people to pay for coaching. And again, it just comes down to this same principle, right? Where somebody's been there, done that. Somebody has solved the problems that you're trying to solve. And so why not go ahead and find somebody that can walk you through it? And I have picked up a ton from my business coach, Jamie. You can go listen to her podcast if you want. It's eventualmillionaire.com. But, it's extremely helpful to have somebody just basically say, look, here's where you're struggling, and here are some of the solutions that you can try. And then you go work them out, and then have somebody come back and basically say, all right, well, I've tried these things. Well, do this differently and do this other thing differently. And yeah, you said this thing paid off, but add this to it because it adds to that. And just having that experience, and that's really what you're getting from a mentor, is the benefit of their experience. You don't have to spin your wheels a whole bunch to try and figure out the best way to do something. Instead, they can kind of lead you down the path to those things and then help you understand how it works without you having to go through the hard way of learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to shift topics a bit? This has been in the in a lot of social media lately about how a junior developer can't seem to find a job, that everyone only wants senior developers.
Can I read you an email?
What's that?
Can I read you an email?
Yeah, sure.
So this is an email from Leo. I don't know Leo's last name, but he sent me an email because I was sending out some information about getting your first development job. And he basically asked this question. He said, how can there be so much competition in web development, so many things to work on just to sell oneself, plus such a great lack of developers? It just makes no sense to me. If you have the skill sets and there is such a need for developers, why should one need to learn and become a salesman as well? So basically what he's saying is there's all this stuff that you need to learn, and then you have to actually go learn how to get a job, but there's this huge demand. So I definitely see the disconnect here. It doesn't make sense. There's a huge demand, and yet, for junior people, they have to figure out how to get people to actually hire them.
So my advice would be to not even look at the job title. Forget about what the company is saying they're looking for, whether it's a junior or senior developer. I would focus on the skill set. The skill set that the company is looking for. Because, I've seen some job posts out there for a junior developer that goes beyond the stuff that I even know. I mean, it's like they're wanting someone with like 40 years of Ruby on Rails experience.
It's so true.
I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And you only want to pay like $20,000 a year? You kidding me? So, don't even go off of the title, because titles are meaningless. They have meaning within the company, and there is some carryover to other companies. But, the title junior and senior developer, it's all, relative to what that company believes it means.
Absolutely.
So, I think it's silly. I'm really big on, not having titles and stuff. So, it's annoying. But anyways, if you go to a boot camp, and if you go to a university, and if you study, and if you have reached a certain point of development, and now you say, okay, I am now good enough to get a job. If that's where you leave it, and if you expect the company to continue your education, on the company's dime, without any extra effort on yourself, at home, continuing learning, then I think that you are going to constantly have this junior mentality, where you're never really advancing beyond, I call it the professional junior, to where you're always that junior. You're never advancing on. Development, it's one of those careers that it requires constant education. There's always going to be a new way of doing something, a new language, something new out there. And if you don't want to be that COBOL developer that's, from the 80s and that's still what you're doing today, the same mundane thing, then, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to constantly learn. And it's going to be something that you have to do on your own, maybe with some company resources and maybe with a mentor, but it's going to be something that it's up to you. So if you've just graduated boot camp and if you've been trying to find a job, but you've not done any other programming outside of that boot camp, then it's never going to fare well, because companies do want someone who can come in and be useful. They want someone, sure, they may not get the most advanced person and they would be willing to, kind of take them on a bit. But at the end of the day, the company wants to hire someone that's going to end up turning a profit for them. Mm-hmm. They're not in the charity case to build you up, to make you a better developer so that you can go on to some other company and they benefit from it. They want someone that they can benefit from. And that's the reality of it. The company wants to use you. There are certain things that they have to do to keep you happy, to keep you there. But at the end of the day, it's on you. It's on you to continue your education. You can't just, if you become stagnant, then you're no longer useful to your company and you're no longer useful to yourself. For the most part, there's always exceptions to the rules, but for the most part, it's a continual education.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say it any better. I mean, ultimately, in my course on how to find a job, one of the first modules is essentially what is a job. And it boils down to what you just said, Dave, which is they have a problem that they think they can profit by solving, and they want you to come in and solve it. And if you can solve it and they can make a profit, then everybody wins and everybody's happy. But you have to show them that you're the kind of person that can solve that problem in a way that makes things work for them. And so, think about what they're really looking for. I mean, some of these folks, they go to the HR department, the hiring managers, and they're like, we need a developer. And so the HR department tells them that they have to make this list, and it's kind of a wish list of technologies and amount of experience. And so then they go out and they look for people who meet that criteria. I think my favorite anecdote is that Groupon was looking for somebody that had 10 years experience in Rails. And this was a few years ago. Well, there was only one man on the planet that had 10 years experience in Rails, and that was the guy that created it. And they reached out to DHH and they said, hey, it looks like you have 10 years of experience in Rails. Do you want to come work for us? And he came back to him and he basically told him to leave him alone and, embarrassed him publicly for it. But, because, it was just kind of funny. Their HR people reached out to him not knowing who he was. And, of course, all the developers in the company are like face palming because they all knew who he was. But, it just kind of goes to show that a lot of times they put this list together of technical skills, and what they're really looking for is the right person who's going to come in and solve the problem. So you do have to have some technical skills, but they're going to come in and solve the problem. They're going to do it quickly and efficiently enough to where the company can turn a profit on them pretty quickly, and that aren't going to cause problems. So they don't have some personality issue. They don't come to work not having showered for a week and kind of drive everyone out of the room. Just basic common things that make you a pleasant person to work with. And so, if you can show, and this is the thing is, so having the certificate from the boot camp, it shows that you can make it through 3 or 6 months of boot camp, but it doesn't necessarily show them that you're the kind of person they want to hire. And I think that's what comes back to this email that I got from Leo, was that, why do I have to work so hard to sell myself? Well, the answer is that they want somebody who can come in, solve these problems, make the company a profit, and make them happy to have you there as a person. And so if you aren't selling them on those things, then they're not going to hire you, because even if you're a genius developer, if you're a headache to work with, they don't want you. And they don't put that on the job listing because I don't know if there's really a way to do that. Don't be a jerk. You just don't see that on the job listing. But, if you can come in and it's like, look, I can solve these problems for you. And I go out of my way to learn enough so that if you have other problems that aren't on this list or that you don't know that I'm going to have to solve, but eventually I will have to solve, you're confident that I can pick it up, contribute, and make a difference there. And then all of the other people that I have to work with are going to be happy to have to interface with me one way or another, and maybe even make some friends at work. And that way everybody's happy to have you there. And if you can put that across so that, hey, look, I work well under the circumstances that I'm going to be working under, I'm going to fit well in the company culture, and I'm going to be, like I said, the kind of person that you want to have around, then boom, you can get that job. But it comes down to being able to explain to people why they want to give you dollars to have you show up. And if it doesn't make sense for them to give you dollars to have you show up, then they're not going to hire you. And if unless they're absolutely desperate, they're probably not going to take a chance on somebody unless they have some indicators that tell them that they at least have even odds of bringing somebody in that they're going to be happy they hired.
Yeah. Because I have been at the same company for 8 years, when we do hire a new developer for our team, I'm the one in the interview room doing the interviews. Mm-hmm. And I have a list of questions that I ask. And, I tailor, and I may not ask certain ones depending on the person's background, because one thing I do not like about a lot of interviewers is that they try to make the candidate feel stupid. And I think that's very counterproductive, because if that is someone that you end up liking, or they're just the best candidate, then they already have a bad taste in their mouth about the company. And you're going to start off the whole dynamics wrong.
Yep.
And then you have other employers who will just want to, test the crap out of you. Like, they'll give you an application. They say, hey, spend 40 hours working on this problem and submit it to GitHub. And if it doesn't pass all of our tests and the secret tests that we didn't tell you about, then, we're not even going to consider you. Or they bring you in and you show up and they said, okay, here is a problem, whiteboard it out.
Oh.
It's like, where have we gone from? Like, the most of a test that I got when I was younger was like an aptitude test. It's like, one of those little silly, here's a sequence of numbers. What's the next sequence? It's like something like that, where it wasn't really, it didn't have anything to do with the job. But what it did do was it let the employer know, how is my thinking? How am I, what level I'm at with being able to identify a issue or a sequence, and how can I solve it? And this was for the sysadmin job. And it was one of those things where they were able to determine that from my way of thinking, that I would be able to solve these kind of problems that was completely unrelated to the test, but it was almost an analogy to what would be happening in the real world. And I think that's so much more important than drilling someone who, maybe doesn't perform well on tests.
Yeah.
But I think that, in my personal opinion, the way to go is a verbal, like a verbal test, just chit-chatting with them. Because you have to be able to determine from conversation, one, what is the point that they're getting across? What is it that they are trying to tell me? And another thing is, sorry, I was just getting a phone call, so I got a little bit distracted. But the other thing is, like, how is this person thinking? How, based on the question that I asked them, what is their process in coming to an answer? And you can tell a lot about someone's capabilities, not necessarily how much they know right now, but what they are capable of. And at the end, that's what it really boils down to. A employer doesn't want to hire someone who knows, they don't want to hire an employee with, here's what this employee knows right now, but they will never be able to get beyond that point. because then that person's only going to be so useful for a short amount of time and then they're gone. They're either going to get bored because they see that, either the work's too hard or it's just not challenging enough, or, the employer is going to lay them off because they're just not able to keep up with the business demand.
Yep.
And of course, if we want to switch topics a bit, one thing that I hate more than anything about finding a new job is third-party recruiters. Yes, for any third-party recruiters listening out there, I'm talking to you. No, I mean, seriously, like, I will get several emails a week, sometimes multiple a day, and they're asking like, hey, we have this data entry position that I think you would be a great fit for, or hey, there's this .NET, I have this .NET client that's so innovative that you're going to be the perfect fit. It's like, did you even bother looking at my LinkedIn profile, at my Twitter page, to see that I have nothing to do with that space at all? Like, why do you think I would be a good fit?
I think my favorite one was I got contacted by a recruiter, and they're like, "Yeah, we found you on LinkedIn, and we're recruiting for this consultancy in Lehi, Utah, and we think you'd be a terrific fit." And I'm like, "Okay, and I was at the time looking for contracts, and so I was like, "Well, are you open to hiring contractors?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." And so I get on the phone with them and I ask them what the name of the company is, and they tell me, and I immediately said, you said you found me on LinkedIn, right? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, did you read my profile? Yeah. So you saw where I actually worked for this company in the past. And, just dead silence, right? But yeah, it's funny. And then they always have the gall afterward to ask, well, do you know anyone else who's looking? And it's like, I'm going to give you my friend's phone number. I don't know anything about you. Give me a break.
So the funniest one that I got, I saved the email, but it'd take me too long to dig it up. But it was more recent. They emailed me, say like, "Hey Dave, I found your profile online, but you know what? I was about to contact you to see if you'd be interested in this job. But I started looking around at some of the different things that you're doing and that you've done, and I've came to a quick realization that there's no way you'd be interested in what I have to offer you. So if you know anyone else," like he skipped like the whining and dining and went straight to like, "Hey, you know anyone else?"
It's cheaper than buying you lunch, right?
Yeah, like I thought that was so funny. Like I didn't respond because I have a policy not to respond to third party recruiters, like a self-made policy. Unless if I'm wanting to mess with them, if I'm in that kind of mood. But it's like, this was either a tactic that he was, maybe hoping that I would say, "Oh, no, I'm interested." Or maybe he really did just read my profile and realize that, I'm not interested in a 2-month contract with having been with my current employer for 8 years,
That's funny.
Like anyone who says that they have a contract position, I'm not going to even give it the time of day because, look, I've been at my current employer for 8 years. I'm happy there. Would I be willing to leave if a better opportunity arose? Perhaps, but a 2-month contract is not a better opportunity in any way, shape, or form. From a stability standpoint, for one. So it was funny. And another thing I found with third-party recruiters, it's so horrible. Like one of them says like, "Hey, I saw your LinkedIn profile, and when you want to get serious with your life, give me a call because I have a great opportunity for you." And I'm like, what makes you think I'm not serious with my life? Like they almost go to that insulting,
right.
Insult you to get something out of you. So it's amazing, like the different tactics that they'll bring to try to kind of suck you in. But that's why it's easier to just have the policy that I will not work with third-party recruiters, cyber coders. I'm sorry, quit contacting me. Not interested, and all that stuff. So if cyber coders is one of your sponsors, Chuck, I'm sorry, you can delete this. But yeah, they're often they don't know the client that they're working for, and they don't know the developer. They're just trying to quickly make a fit.
Yep. So I could go on and on about third-party recruiters, but I think you've covered it. And I think really the most valuable thing that I can say to people who are out there that are trying to find a job is that the thing that has worked for me over and over and over again, and is by far the most valuable thing that I can tell you, is get to know other people in the field, especially in the area that you live in, because they will know where the jobs are. And if they get to know you and trust you, they will refer you to those jobs. And those warm leads come in before they list the job a lot of times. In other words, then you're just competing with the other folks that know somebody that works for the company. And in a lot of cases, those are the better jobs anyway. And so, I mean, you can go hunt the job boards, but, that's just a rung down or two, it's second or third choice from actually finding somebody that somebody at the company's already worked with. And so... And I go into this in detail in the course and then talk about how you get noticed by the folks, and get to know them that work at the company. I also talk about getting to know about the company and targeting the companies that you want to work for so that you get a job that you'll be happy with. But, I mean, by far the best and easiest way to get a job is to get to know somebody who works at a company doing the thing that you want to do. And if you can do that, you kind of get that built-in mentor, which we already talked about. And the other thing is that personal level of referral makes you much, much more likely to get that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, every job that I got, except for one or two, and most of the contracts I got, were people that either got to know me through the podcasts, and so, I didn't necessarily get to know them, but they got to know me, or they came through somebody that I knew in the local community.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. Because there's also some sense of accountability when someone goes to bat for you.
Yep.
Because I mean, when I go to bat for someone, which I don't do often, because that reflects on me. Eventually, and it's kind of funny how a company. I'm not saying this about my company or any company I know, but companies hold grudges. So if I hire someone, okay, so I'll tell you the story. I used to be a manager at Pizza Hut, like back in college, way back in the day. And I went to bat for my buddy who I really liked, but I knew he wasn't like the best of employee, that he was kind of lazy. Not lazy, but, he just, we were in college. So, all of that comes with it. And I went to bat for him to get him a job there, and he ended up getting fired because he would either be late or just wouldn't show up. He did good for some time, but it didn't work out. And I'm like, that reflects poorly on me because I went to bat for this guy. And, now I have to deal with the aftermath of it. So when I do go to bat for someone, it's because I truly believe that they're going to be the best person for the job, and that I believe that they have the capacity for growth.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm in the same boat. In fact, one of my really good friends from high school came to me and asked for a referral, and I had to tell him no because, he just, I didn't think he would work out well in that position. And it sucks sometimes to do that, but I feel like by making those kinds of introductions with integrity, you set yourself up to be able to really make a difference for both those people and for the company that you're referring.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole lot more here, but we've already been talking for about an hour.
Have we? Oh, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we could go into resumes, we could go into salary negotiations, we could go into all kinds of stuff. And I go into a lot of this in the course, so I'm just going to call that out right now. You can go check it out at getacoderjob.com, and there will be a link there to find out more about the course. I'm not going to belabor it much more than that because I think if people are interested, then they will go check it out, and if they're not, then they won't.
Right.
Do you have any parting words of wisdom before we do picks?
Yeah, and I know this could just go so much more, like you said, but on your resume, I mean, take the time and do it right because, there's a Japanese philosophy, ichigo ichie, and the premise of it is this is your once in a lifetime to make an impression. It goes much more deeper than that. But as far as a employer's perspective, that is the very first thing that they're going to see about you. And they are going to form, before they even talk to you or meet you, they're going to form their opinion about you. And getting that opinion to change is going to be really difficult. So you want to make sure that your resume does not have spelling errors, that's grammatically correct, that it is relevant and updated. And, because that's all one resume where someone had in the footer, john.doe@example.com. I'm like, this is a joke. So,
really,
yeah.
John.doe, huh?
Yeah. So you have to make sure that it is relevant to, and it's accurate. Don't lie on it. Don't oversell yourself. Make sure that you are being honest, but highlighting, your best qualities.
Yep, absolutely. The only thing I would add is that I recommend to most people who send in a resume that you have a cover letter that explains who you are and why you want to work for the company that you're applying to. In other words, it should be customized to the company. You should do enough homework to know generally what kind of a person they want to hire, and then explain why that makes you excited to go work for them. That way they understand it's not just, I'm sending this resume everywhere. It's, I really do want to work with you folks. And then the other thing is personalize the resume. So there are some things that one company is going to care about more than another. And if you have that stuff on your resume and make sure that it's toward the top and easy to find, then they're much more likely, because most employers that I've found, they don't read resumes, they scan them. And so if you make it easy to see the points that they really care about, then it's much easier for them to decide, you know what, I need to talk to this person.
Yeah, and single sheet of paper, front and back maybe, but if you use more than 2 sheets of paper, like meaning just two sides, I'm not going to read it. I don't have time to read all that. I had someone who sent me a 7-page resume. I'm like, there is no way I'm going to read this. Like, my answer is no, because you cannot convey your worth within 2 pages. Like, there's no way I'm going to do it. Like, I don't care if you have, like, you've been to the moon and back, like, and you've done all these accomplishments. It's too much. You can't convey, like, here's why I should hire you within 2 pages.
Well, that's what the interview's for anyway. I generally tell people you can go over a page, but everything on there better be relevant. And then, 7 pages is excessive. I don't know if I would go beyond 2, but, if I'm going beyond 1 page, like I said, it better all be relevant to that job. They don't want to see that you worked at Pizza Hut if that's on if that's your work experience on the 2nd page. If they see stuff that's relevant to them, and they see that, you've only had 1 job doing it, and then, maybe you put down that you worked at, Pizza Hut and a couple of other things, but then you just put your leadership in there, or, contributions that show that you have some initiative or something. But, if they really have questions about your resume, the first job or first couple of jobs listed are going to need to be relevant. And then after that, it's just a matter of, hey, we only see, 2 years worth of experience on your resume. And then you can explain, well, I went through the boot camp, and before that I worked for McDonald's or whatever, and they'll understand that. So, just keep that in mind. If they have questions, you don't have to answer them all on the resume. You can answer those in the interview. Just make sure that the stuff that's really going to hit home for them is easy to find and front and center.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's go ahead and do some picks.
Do you hate wasting hours debugging code every week when you should be working on your app? You should check out our new sponsor, Airbrake.io, a full-stack error monitoring tool that alerts you to errors in your software, then helps you diagnose and fix them. That means no more wasted time searching log files and more time writing and shipping great code. Airbrake supports .NET and all major programming languages. Get set up at getAirbrake.com/CB for a free 30-day trial and the chance to win a $500 Amazon gift card at the end of the month. It's a completely free trial and you'll be shocked by how much time it saves you. Again, that's airbrake.com/CB. Again, that's getairbrake.com/CB.
Dave, do you have some picks?
Okay, I have one pick. It's not computers. It's not power tools. It's really embarrassing, but I'll tell you. So my wife was at Hobby Lobby the other day, and I have 3 children under the age of 4. So life is hectic whenever you go try to take 3 kids that young somewhere alone. Well, my son,
I can identify.
She was. Oh dear. She was at the checkout, and my 2-year-old son reaches over at the counter because I swear I hate companies for doing this, but they put all the candy and gadgets and gizmos right there at the checkout, just to get those little kids at the last second say, "Mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, I want this." Well, so my son grabbed a fidget spinner and he just destroyed the box. And my wife didn't notice because she was trying to manage the other 2 and try to check out, make sure everything was ringing up correctly. So she didn't notice, but the cashier guy would just say, their mouth dropped, looking at this little kid devour a box. So she ended up having to buy the fidget spinner. So I've been playing with it for the past week, and it's actually really cool. They're a lot of fun. So fidget spinner, that is my pick.
Awesome. So a couple things that I'm going to shout out about. First of all, I've started doing a video. It's about a 10-minute video every morning, or at least on weekdays right now. I've been rereading the book The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And so, yeah, I've been getting up at 5 a.m. and, going through a morning routine. And part of my routine is recording this 10-minute video on YouTube. So I've got 3 episodes up. It's called The Daily Lasagna. If you go to... there's a story behind it. I tell it in the first episode. But anyway, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff up on the devchat.tv YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, then definitely check it out. And yeah, I'm going to put a link, like I said, to the playlist for the Daily Lasagna. So if you want to just know what I'm talking about or thinking about, then you can definitely check it out. But yeah, I've got 3 videos up as we record this. This comes out next week, so there'll probably be closer to, 8 or so. But anyway, yeah, it's just, some random thoughts. There's usually something that ties it all together, but not always. I make no promises about what I'm going to say or not say or whether or not you'll like it, but it's just kind of an interesting view into things. I've had a few people get back to me and say that they enjoyed it. But anyway, so that's one thing that I'm doing. And then the other thing that I'm doing is I've gone back on the ketogenic diet. And if you're not familiar with that, it's ultra low carb, high fat, moderate protein. And there are some terrific resources out there. So if you're interested in improving your health, and this sounds like something you're interested in, I'm diabetic, so, carbs just are a problem for me anyway. So doing ultra low carb makes a lot of sense, at least to me, for me. And so I'm going to pick a couple of resources there. One is the podcast 2 Keto Dudes. If you are familiar with .NET Rocks, the hosts are Carl Franklin, and it's not Richard Campbell, it's another Richard. I think his name is Richard Morris. And he's from Canberra, Australia, and they are fun to listen to. But they go and they do research and they actually talk about the science as well as their own experience. And I find that it's a good mix of those 2 things. And so I've really been enjoying that. And Carl's a friend of mine. We've gotten to know each other over the last few years since I kind of met them and wound up on .NET Rocks a few years ago. So... Anyway, I've been really enjoying that. And then there's another website called ruled.me, and I don't know why that domain in particular, but they have a whole bunch of keto recipes. And so like this afternoon, as soon as we're done recording here, I'm going to go downstairs and make myself some keto pad thai because I love Thai. Anyway, great stuff. There's a whole bunch of other stuff out there for keto. It's kind of growing. There are more books. There's also another podcast called the Livin' La Vida Low Carb Show by Jimmy Moore, and it's pretty good, but it's a little bit deeper on the science. He mostly interviews people and talks a lot about that, but he's also got a bunch of books like Keto Clarity and Cholesterol Clarity and some of these other books. So if you're trying to get into ketogenic diet or you want to check it out, Keto Clarity was a great book that he wrote. And it's a good way to kind of get introduced to the idea. And there are keto cookbooks and stuff on Amazon, but those are the resources that I've been using lately to lose weight. I did this back in June, and I lost 12 pounds. All of my diabetes markers kind of came in line. And then, for some reasons I'm not going to go into on this show, I wound up going off of keto for about a month, and now I'm back on it. So anyway, enough rambling about my diet, but that's kind of what I'm doing these days.
Cool.
And I guess we'll go ahead and wrap that up. Thanks for coming.
Man. Yeah, thank you.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.